What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show. Me, Sean Sheehan, here on Sherdog.com. And for the first time since the 8th of June, PFL Europe is back. As on September 28th, the PFL Europe 2024 playoffs go down in the Hydro over in Glasgow in Scotland. I believe that's a pretty big venue, a pretty cool venue as well over there in Glasgow. And the card has some of the local talented local flair on it, and a lot of the playoffs, as we know, for this year as well, which will culminate towards the end of the year in the big finale. And it was funny, I was actually talking on another podcast recently about the PFL and the PFL MENA. Might have been that podcast, but also PFL Europe and the PFL proper, let's say PFL Global, with PFL Africa as well starting. Is it next year or the year after? But soon anyway. It's going to be starting soon. I really like what they're trying to do. I really, really do enjoy it, and I like what they're trying to do in terms of, talent production. That's been a thing we've talked about a lot in mixed martial arts over the years. For a while it was kind of, the regional scene, and then you'd go to the UFC and that'd be that. I think a few years ago Bellator actually did a great job of signing a lot of the young talent, and say guys like AJ McKee and others came through there, and they weren't able to get to the UFC, and Bellator had them. Now the Bellator or PFL have them, and I think the PFL, by doing PFL MENA, PFL Europe, they give a platform to the fighters who are younger in their career before maybe they get the opportunity to go to a UFC or to have enough fights to get to a UFC. The PFL, snap them up, put them in their organization, and if they are ready at that stage, they will win all their fights and go on to the PFL season and become the next star. And if they're not, they get the opportunity to maybe come back in again and go at it again. And I think that's a really good thing. Like we've seen promotions like that, promotions who do a task like that over the last few years. Obviously, in America, you had the CFFCs and the LFAs and all that, and obviously Cage Warriors is a standout one here in Europe. And I think there still is a place for them, and in fact, probably more of a place than ever, considering the amount of fighters coming through now. Mixed martial arts is a very different place now than it was before. But for a promotion like the PFL to be able to guarantee a young fighter like that 3 fights in a year, and especially, let's say, a young fighter, right, who they're coming through in their local area, they're 4 or 5-0, they come from the best gym, everyone knows they're the shit. Very hard for those lads to get fights. Very hard. Maybe it's a thing if you just watch the big PFL cards, the big UFC cards, you mightn't think of it, but obviously I covered a lot of the local Irish MMA and things like that, and you hear, I won't name names now, but there was one particular fighter that came through, and this guy, I thought he was a very, very good fighter in the local scene here. And a lot of people thought he was a very, very good fighter. So much so that his first 3 fights, he had to go way up in levels and basically fight guys who are either, coming from another martial art who he shouldn't have been fighting yet, or guys who were like, 10-1 or something like that. He ended up losing a few fights early, and then he ended up retiring. That can happen too. And the PFL MENA, PFL Europe are really, really good for those sort of fighters, to give them a betting, a kind of, not the start of their career, but like the second, I suppose, chapter of their career, in terms of, if your whole career is 10 chapters, their second to third chapter. And you see a lot of that here. You see a lot of it here. Now, the top 2 fights, as we get into preview the card here, are more of like the local standouts that have been around for a long time, guys who are going to sell tickets and put on fun fights. But then we have a barrage of very, very exciting fights in the playoffs. And let me just read these out to you here before we get into, because I'm gonna go back and forth and touch on different people more so here than actually looking at the all the fights themselves, because there's a lot of fights on. How many fights are 1, 2, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we'll be here all night if we were to look at all these fights. But these are the playoffs, and we'll get into the other ones in. Bantamweight playoffs, Federico Faziano against Dean Garnett. Julian Lopez against Alexandra Luster. And then in the welterweights, we have Jack Grant against Florim Zendeli. Ibrahima MENA against Daniele Miceli. And then at lightweight, we have Daniele Scatizzi against the champion from last year, Jakub Kaszuba. Connor Hughes against Ignacio Capella at lightweight as well. And then in the women's flyweights, we have Shanelle Dyer against Valentina Scatizzi and Karolina Wojcik against Paulina Wisniewska. So some really good talent there, some really good names that you want to look out for, and there's no doubt about that. Let's start with the top of the card though, and let's look at Stevie Ray versus Lewis Long. I feel like this is a fight that I need to almost scroll through their Sherdog pages again to make sure that this fight hasn't happened once or twice or three times or you know, this is a sort of fight that it probably should have happened before. Like, if you look at the way these lads came through, the places they fought, you know, looking at Stevie Ray's record, he fought in Bama and he fought in Cage Warriors for a very long time, then obviously went to the UFC and is now in the PFL and had a good few fights in the PFL. And look at Lou Long, you know, fought a good few fights in Bellator, fought a good few fights in Cage Warriors, you know, came through a very, very similar road at a similar time. And you know, it's very interesting how those two roads never kind of overlap, but now they are. And it's very interesting. If you look through these lads' records, right? Now, I'm sure a lot of people tuning in here, maybe you're listening in from the States, and you might have heard of Lou Long, you more than likely heard of Stevie Ray, considering he fought in the UFC and everything like that. But we'll just look at Lou Long first, right? Some of the names that he has fought. He fought Oliver Inkamp. I think a lot of people would know. He fought Walter Gaza, fought Roberto Soldic. He fought Shea Mills, Ryan Scope, Matt Inman, Tommy Maguire, Paul Redmond, who was obviously in the UFC, to name but a few. You look at Stevie Ray, and we'll get to the latter part of his career in a second, but some of the guys he fought, you know, when he was younger in his career, you know, the likes of Carl Warburton, Ivan Bushinger, he fought Carl 3 times. He ended up fighting Mikel Laboute. You know, when he got to the UFC, Alan Patrick, you know, Joe Lozon, Paul Felder, Ross Pearson, and then in PFL, you know, Aubin Mercier, Schultz, Collard, Pettis a couple of times, Martinez, Michael Johnson in the UFC as well. That's, you know, for two guys who've been around for a long time, came through and, you know, never reached the heights, I suppose. That's a serious achievement and serious fighters. And I think the Glasgow people, the Scottish people, the people in the UK and Ireland as well respect that, and they respect the road that they've taken. Like here, Peter Queally, I think, is a similar sort of thing. People respect those sort of fighters, the way they have, you know, the way they have put their career together, whether it's winning or losing. They've taken some really tough fights in tough places at tough times, and, you know, stayed on it, stayed going. And for Stevie Ray especially, I think, you know, coming out of Scotland to headline the card in the Hydro, I think that's probably a massive thing for him. I know, I think there was thoughts of retirement. I think, did he retire after the last fight? You know, he lost 3 in a row in the end of 2022, obviously, and then into 2023. But I'm glad he's back. You know, I don't know whether it's just for one or if he's coming back and maybe going to be in the season next year. But like, beat Anthony Pettis twice, and he got, you know, the kind of the Scottish twister on him the first time. And I remember coming into that fight thinking, I don't know that I pick him to win, but I was thinking, this guy is absolutely no joke. You know, Pettis is a very, very good fighter, but Stevie Ray absolutely has the ability to beat him. And then when he beat him the second time by decision, you know, I think a lot of people kind of changed the narrative and changed their thinking on Stevie Ray, and that's absolutely deserved. And he's a fighter who deserves an awful lot of credit and an awful lot of respect in his career. Like, you know, he beat Pettis twice, beat Michael Johnson, beat Joe Lozon, beat Ross Pearson. That's by no mean feat at all, right? No mean feat. And we've seen Stevie, you know, good striker, hits hard, you know, doesn't have a load of knockouts in his career, but does have a load of submissions, you know, 25-13 record. He's a better fighter than that record suggests. I know it's not a terrible record by any means, but, you know, 15 of those fights went to decision. I bet a few of those decisions that he lost 5 decisions. I bet a few of those were closer, and I bet a few of those 13 losses he was in the chance to win a lot of them. Liu Long on the other side of it, then similar starts of 20-7, 13 submissions. So like if this one hits the ground, it could be a very, very interesting night. I think Liu is more of a, I think they're not too dissimilar fighters at all. I think Liu is more of a maybe I was going to use the word berserker there, but that's definitely not the right word. I think he kind of looks for the big moments maybe a little bit more than Stevie, on the feet. I think Stevie is good at getting behind the jab, is good at beating you to a decision, whereas just looking at Liu Long's record, he's only won 3 decisions in his 27 fights, so that does tell a story, I suppose. Now he's only lost 1 as well. Most of his fights obviously finish inside the distance, but if this is a massive time in his career. He's had very few fights over the last few years. He fought once in 2023, once in 2022, once in 2021, fought a couple of times in 2020, only once in 2019, once in 2018. And he was fighting regularly before that. So, in the last 6 years, he's only had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 fights. Really, really not a lot in that period at all. And 35 years of age for Liu Long. I think it's going to be tough against Stevie Ray here. If I have to give my prediction, I think I'm probably going to pick Stevie. I think if he can get behind that jab, if he can keep the fight on the feet, I think he's going to win. I think on the ground, I think he'd probably get the job done as well. But, the other interesting part of this is that welterweight. Stevie's a smaller guy than that. Liu is well able to fight a welterweight. He's been fighting there for a very, very long time. But I don't know how much Stevie's fought a welterweight. I have to go through the record again. But I don't think very often. You look at his PFL run, all 155. In the UFC, all 155 as well, if I'm not mistaken. So that maybe that advantage will be to Liu, but I fancy Stevie to get the win here. Similar thing maybe could be said for the co-main event. You have Rob Whiteford against Roger Huerta, and Roger Huerta, it's for Roger, 41 years of age to still be fighting, it's mad. And Roger's last fight in the UFC, if you want to guess, people out there, I'll tell you now, right? Give you a second there. Go on, guess what year? 2009. 15 years ago when he fought Gray Maynard and Kenny Florian. Like, I started watching the UFC around 2006-ish or so, and I watched a load of his fights. Now, he had a lot of fights around in as well. He only debuted in the UFC in 2006. So, geez, that's mad. He was only in there for 3 years, but he won a lot of fights in a row. Beat Clay Guida and all. And if you've seen Roger Huerta back in the day, he's a big power puncher, but good on the ground and everything like that as well. Now, look, he's lost his last 4 fights in a row, all in Bellator, to Vincent Henderson, Patricky, Sidney Outlaw, and Chris Gonzalez. I'll be honest, that's pretty tough matchmaking for a guy who's that old, I suppose. But he had no fights between 2019 and 2021. 2021 was his last fight as well. Kind of surprised to see him back. But then again, Robert Whiteford, he's 41 years of age as well. He's only had 1 fight since 2022. Since 2021, he lost to Daniel Weichel. He was on a good run before that, beating Cecilia, Ken Musa, Nam Fan, and others as well. He was fighting ABC and then moved over to Bellator. We know Robert Whiteford, again, another guy who is a finisher, 7 knockouts in his career, few submissions thrown in there as well, fighting out of the Dinky Ninjas. You'd have to fancy Robert, I think, at this stage of his career, even though they're both the same age they are, but, if you've a win, over Sam Cecilia in 2019, Ken Musa 2018, and you look at Roger Huerta, like, let me see the last big name he beat. He beat Haider Hassan, but, who's the last big name he actually beat? Probably was that Clay Guida in 2007, and he's fought Eddie Alvarez and others since then and lost, but that run in Bellator didn't go great. Now, he did go to the decision with Sidney Outlaw, so he's still well able to fight, but you'd have to fancy Robert Whiteford in this one. I always call him Roger Whittaker. I used to always do that. But should be an interesting one. Right, let's get to some of the playoff fights. And the standout fight for me, without a shadow of a doubt, is Daniele Scatizzi against Jakub Kaszuba. Kaszuba, such a talented guy, 12-0, was the champion last year, beating Radu Maxim, beating Dylan Tuke from Ireland here, obviously, and then beating John Mitchell as well. Two very, very tough guys he had to beat there. No shredder doubt about that, and he did a great job. Like, very good striker, good wrestler, and good on top as well. And he's fighting another Irish trained guy here in Daniele Scatizzi, who I think probably had the performance of his career in his last fight. He beat Alessandro Chivas, who is a really good fighter and a really useful fighter. In the first round, he looked him in back in March, and you know he's going to be riding a real wave after that. You know he lost to Dmitry Hishinko before that, but he also beat Davy Galan, and you know the only couple of losses to Hishinko and talk of in the last few years. You know, they're very, 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 very good fighters. And, you know, Scatizzi's one of those guys, when he lifts it to a level, he's a tough guy to beat, and he's a good guy, you know, to go to a decision, win a decision as well. Kaszuba's going to have to be on it here, I feel like, because, you know, I think he gives a different look to the likes of Ken Musa, to John Mitchell and Dylan Tuke as well. Scatizzi is a very much a, like, good cardio, very good defensively, good technical fighter, stay safe, and you have to be very, very good to beat him, you know, which in itself, if he lasts, you know, it's tough. You come to the end of that third round and you're thinking, like, I haven't put him out of here yet, what's going to happen? Or I haven't got close to hitting him yet, what's going to happen? Maybe you take a risk and something happens there, but if I have to give my prediction, I do think Kaszuba is a real talented guy. I think he should probably be in the global season at this stage. Scatizzi, you never know what Scatizzi. You never know. I'll be interested to see when the prices come out in this, but I think Kaszuba will probably be the favourite, and I do think he will end up winning in that one. While we're at that one, the other lightweight fight is Conor Hughes against Ignacio Capella, and honestly, I think that's probably the other standout fight on this card. 9-1 versus 8-1, and two guys who are, you know, very, 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 very talented and very, very good fighters who, you know, you'll probably be hearing a lot more of over the last while. Capella, very good left hook and overhand. He turns vicious when he gets inside, has a lot of power, but I feel like sometimes that overhand, he overthrows a little bit, and if you can push him against the cage, he might have problems there. Conor Hughes at the other side of it, then he's a power striker, but a very, very good wrestler as well. Kind of that open switch stance style with head kicks, and fights very, very tall as well, though. But for Hughes now at 9-1, you know, he lost to Dylan Tuke, and he got kind of out wrestled and beaten in that fight. You would wonder if Capella will look at that and kind of, you know, try to do something similar. Now, I can't remember which one of his fights that, you know, his opponent after Dylan Tuke tried to do it and ended up getting finished pretty quickly. So it's not the easiest thing to do. Whereas, you know, Capella coming out of Spain, 8-1. He beat Yazid Kushain at the start of the year as well. Another guy who's, you know, highly touted, but also he's win over Ago Husic over at the Anthony Pettis promotion. But again, this is the biggest step up of his career. You know, you'd have to probably back Hughes in that one, but it's a very, very interesting fight all the same. Let's look at the welterweights. Jack Grant and Florim Zendeli. You know, Zendeli 6-1 in his career right now. He fought Thomas Langovski in his first fight of this year, and he looked good in that fight, and he looks a good fighter. There's no doubt about that. He's a bit green, and you know, but he's long and good right hand. Not the most technical fighter in the world. Good double leg, but on the ground, you know, he looks good. The thing about it on the ground when he's fighting Jack Grant is you know, a BJJ black belt. People probably remember him from his fight with Ian Gary over in Cage Warriors as well. And, you know, that was a real test for Ian, and he came through it. But Jack has been on a good run since. He's won 3 of his 4 fights, beating Charlie Leary last time out. went to a split decision with the Lazy King, and I know a lot of people are very high in the Lazy King as well, but, beat Nathan Jones. But he's been in there with some of the best, beat Matters Flaminas, been in there with Aggie Sardari and Joy Herbert, Cage Warrior champions, beat Perry Goodwin. He's been around for a very, very long time as well, and for Zendeli, that's going to be tough. A guy who has one fight in the PFL, but other than that, he's never really fought in a top promotion. Young in his career, I think it's going to be a tough one. But you never know. Look, Jack Grant is kind of the yardstick, I suppose, for a lot of guys to go on. But I think Jack might have enough in that one. The other side of the welterweights, honestly, I think this finale here is going to be rather good. We have Ibrahima Mane against Daniele Miceli in that one. Mane, very raw, but I love using the word raw for him, right? Because he's raw power, raw grappler, very good counter right hand, doubles up with the counters as well. Very good at getting the underhooks when defending takedowns. He's just a very, very useful fighter. Miceli on the other side of it, then he's a switch stance guy. He fought Peter Queally, if people remember, submission guy. Beat him with a lot of good people, but lost to most of them. Just about to turn 37 as well. So, I talked about it earlier on the year. A bit odd to see him here, but look, he went in and he got a win over Yassine Najid very, very quickly in the first fight. So maybe turns doubters into believers, but I think this might be a step too far. Khan is a tough fighter. He's won his last 5-6 in a row against some good guys. Leandro Domini being one of them as well. He fought over in Aries, a good bet. And for a guy who's younger in his career, in terms of he's only 17 fights, he's 35 years of age, so now is the time for him, I think, to do it. And Miceli 36 as well. Maybe this is the time, the one to do it against, because I think Mane, if he is to do it, he needs to kick on now, go to the PFL proper, and he's had his time in Brave and in the Aries and other places like that, and now it's time, I think, to go to that next level. So looking forward to seeing that one there. So we've touched on 3 of the 4 playoff weight classes. The last is the women, and again, like the PFL proper, I think the women's division is probably the closest in terms of matchmaking. Valentina Scatizzi, brother of Daniele Scatizzi, or Daniele Scatizzi is her brother. They're both fighting on this card, funnily enough, fighting out of SBG. 3-2, but that doesn't suggest, her ability. The 2 people she's lost to, Dakota Dicheva, who's, one of the best in the world. And she lost early in her career as well, her second fight. She beat Lizzie Javers and beat Maria Loazo as well in her last fight. But Shanelle Dyer looks a real prospect. She's only 23. Lot of amateur fights as well. She fought against Sinead Nidolan from Ireland, who's a very good fighter who's after turning pro over the last while. She fought Sean O'Bannon. Okay, she lost that fight, but still, and she's 5-0 now. Won her PFL debut last time out. She's also fought that was her second PFL fight, but this was the first in the PFL tournament. She's won an area. She's fought an FCC, which is a good promotion. I like. She's probably one of these people as well who's struggling to get fights in PFL. Is absolutely perfect for her. Very tough to look at Shanelle Dyer against a lot of these people and not pick her. She's that good. There's no doubt about it. And I think for Scatizzi, I think you have to make it dirty. You have to get on the inside, land your big shots to the body, maybe land a few shots over the top, whereas Dyer will want to be keeping on the outside while she can. If she needs to get a takedown, I'm sure she's well able to do that as well, but land your jab and land your big shot over the top. And that head kick she landed in the last one, I'm sure will be something she's looking for again here. The other side of that draw in is Karolina Wojcik against Paulina Wisniewska. With Scatizzi a minute ago, I was just about to mention, actually, she's some very good training partners, Danny McCormack being one of them, and Karolina Wojcik actually fought Danny McCormack twice. She ended up losing for the Invicta title to her last year, funnily enough. She fought twice since, ended up losing once in Octagon, but she had a very good win over Lizzie Jeevers. She actually fought Danny McCormack in an amateur zone. She won that fight, so Danny kind of came back and won that one. But she has some good wins throughout her career. She beat Kira Pacheco, who I believe has a couple of fights at a level as well. And she's, very, very, very active. She only debuted in 2018, and already has 17 fights. That's absolutely incredible, whereas Wisniewska, she only started in 2023. She beat Dee Begley last time out. Dee has kind of struggled at the early part of her career, but Dee's a good fighter, there's no doubt about that. It's a tough one to pick because if Wojcik, I think, can get going, she's well able to beat Wisniewska. She has the experience, but I think if Wisniewska can get, I feel like she's bigger, stronger, more powerful. If she can get inside, maybe put her on the ground, I think it's going to be tough. Like, Karolina's not the biggest finisher in the world. She's only 2 finishes in those 17 fights I mentioned. And she won a lot of decisions. So she's doing something right. She's good at landing like little elbows inside, and she's a good striker, good all round fighter. There's no doubt about that. But I think it's a tough one because Wisniewska doesn't have that much experience. But I think I might just pick her in that one to win as well. So that'd be interesting to see there. So those are all the big fights. On the undercard, it's a lot of younger guys coming up here. We have Jima Auld against Wawrinka Pietruska, both 0-0. I've heard the name Jima Auld before. She is fighting out of Scotland, I believe, and she was a very decorated amateur. Has a lot of wins there. So looking forward to seeing her debut. I believe she's a little bit older as well. So it'll be get in there and get the wins very, very quickly. Matthias Zarafis is on this card as well. He is, he's training out of Ireland, and he fought some of the good guys, around this area as an amateur, and as a pro, he's a win over the likes of Kieran Mulholland as an amateur, and he fought, Hughie O'Rourke, Barry Hanna, a long time ago, but he's, fought Lewis McGill and Evans last time out, was unlucky to win that one, lost by decision, won 2 in a row before that, and I'm looking forward to seeing him in there. His opponent, Brian Hyslop, if I'm pronouncing that right, he's out of Scotland, so I'm sure they'll be glad to have him on it, selling a few tickets. But he started off his career 4-0. He's gone 3-2 since then, or 2-3 even since then. So I'm sure they'll be looking to get him back in here with a win. And then we've Lorenzo Parente also fighting on the card, I believe. Let me just check that one there if it's on the. It's still to be decided. But stand-up fight for me here. Mark Ewan against Yassine Chateau. Very, 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 very interesting to see what Mark Ewan comes in here looking like. He's 5-1 now, lost his last fight, the Claudia Basella. I very much wasn't expecting him to lose that. It wasn't a great performance by him, but Mark is a top prospect for me. And I said it before the loss, and I'll say it again after it. I'm really looking forward to seeing how he bounces back here. His opponent is... He's only had 8 fights, but he's a lot of knockouts. 3 knockouts and he's 5 wins in that. His last 3 fights in a row, he's won, got finishes in every single one of them. So it'll be very, very interesting to see how he looks here coming out of France. Only fought, in July, he's fought 3 times this year and, won all 3. So, maybe not the best of opponents, but he's a very, very good opponent on is it Friday night or Saturday night, the 28th anyway, and we look forward to seeing that. So PFL Europe is back with a bang. Looking forward to seeing it, and keep tuned to Sherdog.com for all your coverage. Until then, my name is Sheehan for Sherdog.com, and I'll see you all next time.